What's up everybody, Gen X Dividend Investor here. In this video I talk about my passively growing dividend income and why I prefer that even more than my pension income. So one thing I've hardly talked about on my channel is the fact that in a few years I'll start getting a pension. You see, early on in my career I worked at a Fortune 500 company that had a pension plan, and after working there for 5 years I automatically became eligible for its benefits. Unfortunately, they ended up canceling their pension plan, though I was still grandfathered in, which meant that no future hires would be eligible to join it, and existing participants like myself could no longer get higher pension payouts even if we stayed employed there for longer. Apparently, the execs felt that carrying pension liabilities on their financial statements made them less attractive to investors, as well as made it more difficult for them to be as competitive of an employer in the market, since almost everyone else was just doing 401ks, which they also did. And for reference, a pension plan is a retirement plan where an employer contributes money into a pool of funds set aside for a worker's future benefit, aka they're investing in stocks and bonds and plan to give out a guaranteed recurring income in retirement years. The amount you get paid is usually based on your years of service and the average salary of your last few years of work. For example, a pension plan might pay 1% for each year of the person's employment times their average salary for the final 5 years of work. So an employee with 10 years of service at a company that had averaged $50,000 a year in the last 5 years of working would end up receiving 1% of $50,000 or $500 times 10, which is $5,000 a year in pension, starting at retirement age for as long as they live. Now, the normal age I can start getting my pension income is 62, but I can also choose to take it as early as 55 if I'm okay with a smaller payout, which I am. Though I recommend you don't do what I do. I mean, I've got various health conditions which will probably end up shortening my life, and investing is a passion hobby of mine, so I'm comfortable with getting my hands on a lower payout sooner, but many people should just defer getting their pensions or social securities or whatever as long as they can. Fortunately, this new income stream that I'll be getting in a few years will be gravy for my family, so we can raise our standard of living or invest or whatever we want. My pension will actually be an annuity, and I'll be able to manage aspects of it using Fidelity's retirement site, since that's what the company I worked at used decades ago. An annuity is just a financial instrument which is meant to offer you secure cash flow in retirement, aka it will pay out X amount of dollars each month. Annuities often pay out until you die, though some pay out for a set period of time. I actually contacted my pension plan and asked them if they'd buy out my pension by offering me a lump sum, simply because I feel more comfortable managing my money rather than rely on somebody else, and they actually said that they're considering doing that for everyone in the plan, but they haven't fully decided if they're going to do it. Though again, I'd recommend most people not take a quick payout. And side note, I think it would be fun to sell annuities or pension plans to people, and underneath the covers I'd invest in quality dividend ETFs. So I'd take the risk of having to pay out recurring income to my customers no matter what, with the upside for me being able to keep the underlying investments that people made in order to get that guaranteed income stream. Anyway, when I hit 55, I'll log into my Fidelity retirement site and I'll select various options for my pension. Now, if I waited 10 more years until age 65, then I'd get about an 85% larger payout each month. But as is, I'll just get a few $100 a month in pension, which ain't much to write home about, but hey, it'll be fun to get another recurring income stream, even if it's not the $10K plus a month I get right now in dividend income. Plus, in another decade or so, I'll be able to get another income stream in Social Security, assuming I take it early, which I plan to do. And since my wife is younger than me, she'll also get her Social Security further down the road, but her income has always been a lot less, so her Social Security payouts will also be a lot less. And speaking of my wife, another pension annuity option I'll select will allow my spouse to get my pension once I die, which will lower my monthly payouts by about 10% right now, but overall is a reasonable thing to do since my wife will probably far outlive me. I don't recall seeing an option for my kids to get my pension if both my wife and I croak, and that's one reason why I prefer dividend income over my specific annuity plan. I mean, our kids will get all of our dividend stocks as well as the associated ongoing income. Another benefit divvies have over my pension is that you can invest more into them to continually grow your income stream, whereas my pension is locked down in terms of how much it'll pay out once it starts, thus it will continually have less buying power over time as inflation eats away at it. And note, I'm just talking about my annuity pension in this video, not all annuities that are out there, as some offer the potential for growing payouts. But I still way prefer dividend income. I mean, my dividend stocks tend to do dividend hikes, allowing my income to grow on its own, and my dividend hikes have historically outpaced inflation on average. Like literally this morning as I work on this part of the video, Travelers Companies, which is 1.2% of my portfolio, announced a 5% dividend hike, which was their 20th consecutive year of dividend increases. And yesterday, J&J, which is about 5% of my portfolio, announced a 4.2% dividend hike, which was their 62nd consecutive year of increasing their dividend. And last week, Procter & Gamble, which is over 4% of my portfolio, announced a 7% dividend hike, which was their 68th consecutive year of dividend increases. So while my dividend income isn't guaranteed, it has been trending up for decades, all of which means my buying power has continually increased without me doing anything. Note, I do reinvest a small portion of my dividends in my retirement account, but the far lion's share of my divvies I'm taking out to pay bills. Now, one benefit that pensions tend to have over dividend stocks is that pensions are supposed to pay out guaranteed income, but later I'll share some stories which highlight that even pensions aren't always guaranteed. And even with my dividend income not being guaranteed, I still believed in dividends enough that I retired a few years ago from working 9-to-5 jobs once my dividend income was more than my family's expenses, which is a testament to how confident I am that they'll continue to pay out. And that's why I always stress investing in quality dividend companies so much. You won't always get the highest dividend yield, but you have a much better chance of having sustainable growing income, along with better opportunities for stock appreciation. Anyway, my hope is that my kids and all my future generations will follow my suggestion to be buy and hold investors, and maybe my dividend portfolio will be the beginnings of true generational wealth creation for my lineage. Another reason I like dividend stocks more than my annuity pension is that I have far more control in what I invest in or what I don't invest in. Like if I want to raise my portfolio's dividend yield, I can move my stocks in that direction, knowing that there are trade-offs to doing that. Or if I want to own certain companies, or maybe not invest in certain companies, I can do that as well. I sometimes get comments from people who flame me for holding Coke or Pepsi or McDonald's because of the health impacts, or they freak out over me holding pharma companies because they charge too much, or maybe because they've done animal testing or whatever. Ironically, many of those same people invest in the S&P 500, perhaps not realizing that they hold many of the same companies that I do, just indirectly. Plus, I feel more pride of ownership holding stocks directly, and it actually motivates me to invest more. Like whenever I go to Starbucks or Home Depot, or whenever I see brands from companies I own, or whatever, it all jazzes me up a bit. I literally own parts of those companies, and eventually my kids will own them. My pension will just give me cash, which is great, but not as cool as owning a company which also pays you cash in the form of a dividend. And the real point is that I own the assets when we're talking about single stocks, unlike my annuity, and that ownership lets me align my portfolio to whatever my needs, goals, and risk tolerances are. I can ultimately choose if I want to invest more conservatively or aggressively, whereas pensions tend to be super conservatively invested to ensure their ability to pay out. Of course, some people would prefer not dealing with owning individual stocks and instead would just want to see the checks coming in from their pension, and I can appreciate that. So the way I created my pension-like dividend income was by investing in a diverse basket of quality companies for many decades. I started from zero a little over 30 years ago and began investing into a work 401k. I also started a taxable account, but investing in it seemed scary to me at first because investing post-tax dollars I had in my checking account seemed a lot more real than the 401k pre-tax contributions that didn't end up in my bank. I remember thinking about just using CDs rather than stocks because I didn't want to lose anything, but I realized that you had to take some risks in order to win over the long run, and I knew that the market trended up if you waited long enough, and I knew that inflation kept eating away at your cash, so I took the plunge and invested into single stocks. I didn't put all my spare cash into investing, and I spent a lot on video games and dating and cars and all that stuff, but I did make sure to invest some as well. My 401k had some mutual funds that I could choose from, and my taxable started with some dividend stocks and non-dividend stocks. Over time, as I left jobs, I'd roll my 401k into a self-directed traditional IRA, and then I'd invest in decent stocks. One mistake I made when I first got a 401k was that I hardly looked at the funds that my work let me invest in. I didn't know about expense ratios, and instead I'd just pick funds that performed the best over the last year of data that they shared with me. Had I known better, I would have focused on broad market US funds if they were available. After the dot-com crash hit, I saw that my large cap dividend stocks held up a lot better than anything else I had, and seeing my portfolio drop so much helped shape what I did going forward. Of course, all that really happened was that I had primarily been investing in smaller cap, highly speculative tech stocks, pretty much all of which blew up, and then the few S&P 500 companies I had still lost, but lost less. Now, when I was a kid, my dad took me to Wells Fargo to get a checking account, and that's when I learned about interest income and the basics of compound interest, and it blew me away that they would pay me just to hold my money. Ever since then, I dreamed about how awesome it would be if I could generate enough income from my money without having to do anything for it. Thus, as I invested in the market, my eyes were on the prize of having enough dividend income that I'd never have to work again. As the years went on, I learned about how dividends and taxes work, and learned that you have to stay on top of changing tax laws in order to optimize your money. I learned that 20 to 30 individual stocks is the amount that most experts recommend you hold, though I also learned that simply holding broad market ETFs was considered the smartest thing to do. I came to understand the pros and cons of real estate investment trusts versus utilities versus MLPs and BDCs and etc. Along the way, I reinvested any dividends I got, and as I had more investable cash, I'd drive it into my portfolios. I learned that having a diverse portfolio of stocks was prudent so that no single stock could sink you if it went under, and because different sectors and industries of stocks prospered as time went on. I researched the pros and cons of lump sum investing versus dollar cost averaging, and basically learned to get your investable cash working as soon as you have it. I found out about dividend yields and payout ratios and learned how to read financial statements and other basics like that, all to help me identify good companies and to craft my portfolio. Bottom line, I figured out that at a young age, you should focus on growing your portfolio size, and if you get to the point where you need passive dividend income, then you can move money to enable that goal. That being said, if you want to build additional dividend income streams at a young age, even though your total returns may suffer, either due to extra taxes you pay along the way or for whatever reason, then you could choose to do that, as there are valid reasons to do so. Ideally, you should focus on quality stocks, dividend or not, and then you can always sell shares if you need some income. My point is that while I went the dividend route, the reality is that there are an infinite number of paths to success, with the most important thing simply being to keep investing, non-stupidly, for a long period of time. Don't FOMO into or out of stocks. And if you gotta sell, then be glad you can, as pensions generally don't offer that option of liquidating anytime you want. And while many people think pensions are guaranteed, the reality is that nothing in life is guaranteed. For example, some pensions may be underfunded, and that can lead to problems. Like, I read an article in the Washington Post that said that the Pension Benefit Guaranty Corp, aka PBGC, a government body which insures some private sector pensions, said that about 125 multi-employer pension plans covering 1.4 million people are expected to run out of money over the next 20 years. So in an effort to save those plans, Congress passed the Multi-Employer Pension Reform Act that allows financially troubled pension plans to apply to cut workers' and retirees' benefits. That led to over a dozen plans cutting tens of thousands of retirees' benefits by more than 60%, with the result being that some of those retirees are having to forego medical treatment, sell their homes, and even consider filing for bankruptcy. And what sucks even more is that some of those retirees whose benefits have been cut had given up wage increases in exchange for their promised pension benefits. I guess that's part of the risk of putting your money under someone else's control. I mean, those retirees didn't do anything that caused the underfunding of their pension plans, but regardless, they seemingly got nailed. That article also said that it's not just some private pension plans that are in trouble, but also some public ones are. For example, in Detroit, unfunded pension and retiree healthcare liabilities account for about 40% of the financial obligations of the city, which ended up filing for federal bankruptcy protection in 2013. As part of its bankruptcy, Detroit had to make some major changes, which included cutting some pension and healthcare benefits for retirees, along with reduced pension benefits for current workers. A report by Pew Charitable Trust examined the aftermath of Detroit's pension crisis and said that unfunded pension obligations and retiree healthcare costs amounted to roughly $7.4 billion of Detroit's $18 billion in bankruptcy debt. Beyond that, Pew also found that governments have underfunded their pensions by at least $1.28 trillion. So clearly pensions don't seem to be guaranteed, even though we have a government agency literally called Pension Benefit Guaranty Corporation. In fact, Investopedia says, a number of situations could put your pension at risk, including underfunding, mismanagement, bankruptcy, and legal exemptions. Laws exist to protect you in such circumstances, but some laws provide better protection than others. So some employees can apparently get unlucky with their promised pensions, and if that happens to you, then I'd recommend you reach out to legislators, the news media, the legal system, and the government. Basically, don't go down without a fight. And with all that being said, the reality is that fewer and fewer people can even get a pension these days, especially in the private sector, as companies have migrated away from them. I'm still happy I'm getting one, and I wish mine was larger, so don't take me sharing some downsides of pensions as meaning I dislike them. It's just that I still prefer dividend income more, and I feel like I created a stream of income that's better than pension income, and that anyone can do it. If you are one of the few folks who get pensions, then I'd still urge you to invest and manage your finances carefully, as you don't want to be left holding the bag if someone else out there drops the ball on you. I unfortunately found lots of stories of people who got screwed out of their pensions. Like this first one came from someone who had allegedly worked at an automotive company until his job got outsourced. Then to add insult to injury, his company he used to work for went bankrupt, and so he went to the PBGC to find out when he could get his pension, and they apparently told him that he could begin getting it right away since he had enough working years under his belt. So he received his pension for 5 years, but then he was informed that he actually wasn't eligible for a pension because of some contracts his company had made, and thus they told him that not only would he no longer get a pension, but he actually had to repay back the pension he had been receiving. That's insane. Or this story about a guy who had worked at UPS for over 3 decades, during which time his union allegedly sometimes said that they were increasing their pension payouts rather than doing more salary increases. But he recently got a notice that their pension payouts would see a reduction of 40%, which came as a complete surprise to folks. So not only did he not get all the raises he could have while he worked, but he's also not getting the full pension he was promised. Note, I found these pension horror stories on a government site called pensionrights.org, where people share pension problems they faced. Now, I'd guess that most pension payouts run smoothly, but my point is that nothing is truly guaranteed, even if someone says they are. So I've shared a variety of tangible things that I did to create a pension-like dividend income stream, but there are some intangible things you should do as well, and specifically I'm talking about your mindset and your behaviors. What do I mean? Well, take a look at this comment I recently got in my video titled, "What I Learned Living on Dividends for 3 Years." The person watched my video and then left a comment saying that they thought that I'd have to go back to work eventually. They apparently don't believe that you can retire off dividend income, but maybe when I post my video in October about what I've learned living on dividends for 4 years, then perhaps they'll come around to what's possible. My point is that if you don't believe that you can do something, then you definitely can't do it. But if you believe you can, if you have the right mindset, then you will. Beyond mindset, your behavior also matters. Specifically, I'm talking about your habits of investing and living within a budget and all of the actions you take. Eventually, you'll get to a point where down markets don't freak you out, and you'll get excited to invest rather than excited to spend money like most people get. The behaviors you have and the actions you take can enable your success, or will limit it. If you can just invest non-stupidly for a long period of time, all the while not wasting your money, then I think you'll surpass your own expectations. By non-stupidly, I mean don't blindly invest in yield, and make sure you invest most of your money in good assets at decent prices. Don't panic out of the market when times are tough, and don't give up when bad things happen. And if you do have to step away from the market for a while, then get back in when you can, and of course avoid bad debt. The reality is that most people in this world don't invest. And even of those that do, most don't remain committed to it over the long run. Like Vanguard found that the median retirement account balance for people over 65 was only $75K. That means that half the retirees in the nation probably have less than that to their names. But getting to $75K in a retirement account by the time you're 65 should be doable if you work at it, especially if you start young. I mean, if you're 21 years old, you have 44 years of investing ahead of you before you hit 65. And if you can only invest $8 a month at a 10% return, then you'll end up with more than the median retirement amount. Invest $20 a month and you could grow your retirement account to about $183,000. Or invest $110 a month and you could break that magic $1 million mark. The alternative to investing may be a pretty grim looking retirement. In fact, in the US, many seniors are stuck with lives of never-ending work rather than retirement, and the number of seniors that will work until they die is unfortunately only expected to increase in the coming decades. Here's a visual chart showing you how people are working longer in the US over the last 20 years, along with projections of how it's expected to continue. Today, 62% of older workers are working full-time, compared with 47% in 1987, according to the Pew Research Center. And a real challenge older workers face is being employed at a decent job. A lot of what they end up doing is taking up jobs which don't leverage their decades of experience, simply because getting past the hiring gauntlet, coupled with ageism, makes many jobs out of reach. And then some poor older folks never had great careers, so they tend to struggle even more. Like this article I just read talked about a senior lady named Roberta who is still working at age 76. She didn't think she'd be alive at 76, let alone still having to work. And she's an example that highlights why I value investing so much in order to create your own dividend income stream. Roberta worked dozens of odd jobs throughout her life, including a house cleaner, a home health aide, a telemarketer, a librarian, etc., and never received a pension. Now she goes to her local grocery store and helps out, earning $50 a day because she needs the money. Beyond that grocery store money, her only other income comes from $915 a month of supplemental Social Security. But her rent is $1,040 a month, which she used to split with someone else, but they unfortunately died. So now she's taking on credit card debt to cover the gap and to pay for utilities, food, and other essentials, and she often goes to a church food bank for supplies. And Roberta's reality is becoming more common amongst older women. These days, an average woman in her 80s is paying $8,400 in out-of-pocket medical expenses each year, even if they're covered by Medicare. Many people reaching retirement age don't have the pension that lots of workers in previous generations did, and they also often have not put enough money into their 401ks to live off of. That means that as people reach their mid-60s, they either have to dramatically curtail their spending or keep working to survive. The executive director of the National Institute on Retirement Security said that this will be the first time that we have a lot of people who find themselves downwardly mobile as they grow older, and so many are going from being near poor to poor. I tell you all this to both make sure that you're aware of what's going on, as well as to hopefully influence you to take action today so that your retirement in the future is much better. And don't stop with just yourself. Consider sharing this video with a friend or family member, because that action could literally change their lives. I mean, I'm guessing that if you're watching this stuff, then you're already ahead of most people out there, since you're actively spending some of your time to try to educate yourself on financial stuff. So hopefully you won't end up like this other lady that was in a different article I just read, someone who retired after a 50-year career doing odd jobs like game show producer to Hollywood party planner to casino executive. She thought she could finally retire, so she settled into a life of golf, game nets, and pickleball in her San Diego community with her daughter living nearby. But then inflation got out of control. Gas was nearly $5 a gallon, medical costs were adding up, and her grocery bill was increasing. So she downsized, stopped driving as much, and waited longer between haircuts. But it got so bad that she could no longer afford some of her medications. She said, "It got kind of scary, I needed some extra money coming in." So last October at the age of 80, she ended her retirement and got a job giving out samples at Costco. She started making $18 an hour, and she said her plan was to put her new paychecks into a savings account after paying her bills. That got me wondering if she knew about investing in dividend stocks, or if money was simply so tight that investing wasn't realistic for her. But that's why I urge you folks to invest whatever you can as soon as you can and then keep doing it. You guys know that baby step improvements starting today can drastically change what your tomorrow becomes. And remember, it's never too late to go on a better path. Look to cut expenses where you can and strive to do better in your career and maybe take on some side hustles. Drive any investable cash you can scrape up to go towards your investments. Maybe consider moving overseas to where your money can go a lot further. I mean, the average cost of living in Mexico is almost 50% lower than in the US. So if you're spending $40K a year on expenses, you could have a similar style of living on $20K a year down there. Thus, even if you're starting at a zero net worth right now, even if you don't have many investable years ahead of you, just realize that there are always ways you can strive to have a decent retirement, and maybe even an amazing one, assuming you're willing to think outside the box. Earlier today, I was talking to a close relative of mine who's in her early 50s, and she said that she feels like she just doesn't have the energy to keep working, but she's going to have to, probably as long as she lives. She works in the public education sector and will eventually have a pension along with Social Security, and she's putting some money into her 401k, but she still doesn't see a viable path to ever retiring. I asked her if she'd ever tried to pencil out different scenarios of both downsizing and probable future income streams in an effort to see the light at the end of the working tunnel, but she felt that all of the unknowns in her life were just too broad for the estimating to be worth doing. Like she's not sure if she'll have to support kids, parents, etc., and those types of unknowns led her to feel that estimating things in the future would be pointless. Now, I'm a planner, and I found that planning things out more, even knowing that things will probably deviate materially from my plan, still is a worthwhile endeavor to repeatedly do, and I would especially plan if I didn't think I'd ever be able to retire with the current path I was on. And I'm not saying you have to figure everything out, but do spend some time planning your retirement strategies, both how to get there and what you'll do once you're there. And as Eisenhower said, plans are nothing, planning is everything. Or heck, just listen to Warren Buffett who said, "Someone is sitting in the shade today because someone planted a tree a long time ago," which to me summarizes how I view my dividend portfolio. It brings me great pleasure knowing that my future generations should feel a lot more financially secure than I ever did, and I hope that they get to keep eating the cash fruit that comes from the dividend orchard I started planting many decades ago. And with that, I'd like to close things out, and I'd recommend you consider using my FASTgraphs affiliate link along with my coupon code I shared in the description of this video, as using both will allow new users to get 25% off their first payment, even if they sign up for a full year. Plus, check out my Seeking Alpha affiliate link, as new users often get distinct benefits for using it. Finally, take a look at joining as a channel member, or check out my Patreon to see if it has any seats you want to join up for. Whatever you do, please hit the thumbs up button, subscribe if you haven't yet, and click the bell notification. And don't forget to join my free Dividend Discord chat server, which has over 11,000 dividend investors on it from 81 countries around the world. Thanks for watching, stay positive, and I'll talk to you again real soon. Remember, I'm not a financial advisor, and my videos are for entertainment and inspirational purposes only. Investing of any kind involves risk. I'm only sharing my opinions with no guarantee of gains or losses on investments.